AI is deflationary. Prices are compressing, retainers are shrinking, execution layer work is getting cheaper and will continue to get cheaper by the month. But it's not all that bad. So I'm an optimist here. Let's think about, what does this actually do? I think this is actually going to create more demand than we've ever seen before. But before I dive into that, I have to tell you about a conversation that actually triggered this entire podcast, this entire new Substack that I wrote and I'm filming here for you. So I was chatting with an agency friend. He works with agencies, and he told me that one of the agencies that he knows recently dropped their fees, not because the work was getting worse or because results dipped. They dropped their fees because AI can do most of their work. And they were thinking, hey, we're using AI to do some of the heavy lifting. We can't justify the same rates. That's what they're thinking. So they literally offered an AI discount. And if you know anything about me, that's not the best framing or positioning, and I'm not a fan of that. But this is what we're calling, and I'm calling, the AI pricing trap. You get better tools, you produce more output, you deliver faster, then you charge less because the machine did the work, or even all of the execution layer. And let's think about that for a second. If you do that, if you really do that, you just gave clients a discount for your own innovation. So let's think about this for a second. You gave clients a discount for you taking the time to innovate and figure out how to produce results. Maybe if you think your results are worse off with AI, then you're using it wrong. So that's one key thing. But if you're actually producing more work, able to do more quality work and go deeper, you're literally discounting your innovation. So this is Jevons paradox playing out in real time. So Jevons paradox from 1865, he observed that when coal was more efficient to use, people didn't use coal less, they actually used it more. And the same things that are happening here now with services. The efficiency gains are making it cheaper per unit, which will increase the total consumption, which is really interesting. And that's happening now. AI tokens are going to be compressed and be cheaper, and the models are going to get better. And we can parallel that to what's happening in consulting and agency services, just like I discussed in the services stack in that article. The cost of producing output is going to drop, but at the same time, the paradox is, and my hope is, and this is what the parallels are, is that the demand for that output goes up if it's good output. So the main reason I'm mentioning all this is that agencies and consultancies who are going to understand this aren't going to race to the bottom and just compete on price, because that's essentially competing on zero. I think they're going to capture the new value that this efficiency creates. And if you do drop your prices, well, you're pretty much just telling the market that the value that you delivered was always in your labor. It was just in the hours in the hands. I'm putting my hands up here if you can't see the video on the account. So if that's what you were selling, then yes, your pricing is in trouble. But if you're selling outcomes, transformation, conviction, if you're selling belief, your pricing has nothing to do with how the work gets done. That's very, very, very important to think about that. And I wrote about this, like I mentioned, in the services stack, and I also did a podcast on that the macro shift happening across consultancy and agency services, where AI is compressing execution, meaning it's making it easier for us to execute. The agencies and consultants that are going to thrive will sell on transformation, relationship, and belief. We'll put somewhere here in the notes to get access to the services stack so that you can see what happens with the services stack, how to sell at the higher level, and what replaces the traditional consulting and agency model. So that's the macro picture. The question that I've been sitting with and inspired me and triggered me to write this is, if we accept this thesis that value in consulting and agency services is going to move up the stack, how do you price it? Because the old models don't work anymore. Flat retainers assumed you had fixed cost of delivery. That really doesn't exist anymore. Hourly billing, we always knew was an issue. Hourly billing punishes you for being faster. And project fees don't account for the 10 to 100x value creation, net new value creation that's possible now when you deploy your intellectual property with agents. So I've been working, like I mentioned, I've been working through this in my own practice, now with clients. And the framework that I'm landing on really is a quadrant, the new value quadrant. And what I want to do here is explore each one of these quadrants and kind of give you my take of where we're heading. And this isn't just like an idea out of nowhere. Like, I'm practicing a few of these at the same time, and I'll share more about that. So let's dive in. So the new value quadrant, there are 4 ways to price consulting and agency service in the Agentic era. 4 distinct quadrants, each with a different relationship between you, your AI agents, and the value you create. The most important thing that you're going to take away here is that you're going to create net new value. Don't, you will be replaced. So most service providers are still stuck in legacy pricing models, or even worse, they haven't even considered that there are multiple models emerging because they're not adapting. And if you're still thinking in retainers or hourly rates, everything's going to shift under you. So my goal with the value quadrant is to give you a map. Not every quadrant is right for every client or every stage of your business. Some of you listening here should just start with quadrant 1 and stay there for a while, to be honest with you. And others might be ready for quadrant 3 or 4 today. But I want to put a disclaimer and a super important note here is that you can build a beautiful business just operating only in one of these quadrants. The goal is not for you to ascend from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4 or to do quadrant 1 and 3 and then maybe 4 in the future. Like the goal is for you to see where you're at, what you can do, what you can leverage. And this is why I'm calling them quadrants, not stages or steps. I'm just here to share with you. Here's what I found. Here's what I'm working on. And these are 4 that exist right now so that you can make a deliberate choice of where you're going to capture value and how you're going to change or modify your pricing model that you've probably been running for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. All right, so here's the quadrant. Quadrant 1 is the margin play. In short, if you do the margin play with AI agents, your prices stay the same, yet the way that you deliver gets dramatically more efficient, a la agentic workflows, delivery that help you keep better margins. And this is the simplest play because you really don't change what you charge and you don't change what you deliver per se, but you're leveraging AI to handle a lot of the production of your team. So your cost of delivery drops significantly and your margins and your profit expands, and the client can get same and or better or even more consistent results that they were already paying for. Now, if you're a client of mine listening to this, I know who you are. But if you're a client, I wouldn't just allow you to keep things as is. If you're playing in this quadrant, we would focus specifically, you're seeing this, on creating net new value. How much more value can you create under this quadrant? Because even if you say, let's say the example, if this is a simple example, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but if 100-hour work now takes you 20 hours to do, what are you doing with that 80 hours of savings or that 80 hours of time? You could eat that profit, like invest it in or take it home. But I think it would behoove us not to think about how can I add more value to the client? How can I create this breathing room? Like if I don't have to spend the additional 80 hours, how can we invest that into R&D? Or how can we invest that to help the client go further to end goal, to end state in ways you couldn't before? And that's what net new value creation looks like. So this might look like the time you're saving, you're reinvesting it back into the client, into the relationship, into the strategic ideas. And again, end state. You want the client to get closer to goal accomplished, whatever that means for your industry, for your client. And with the agents, hopefully you're able to do more than you could before if you know how to leverage them correctly. So this would be new execution, new strategic thinking, more proactive recommendations, more of, hey, I noticed this thing and I recommend we do X, Y, and Z. Or where I want you to be is, hey, if you're telling this to your client, hey, I noticed this thing. We actually already solved it for you. Here's what we did. And here's what we're planning to do next. Because in the past, to do that, it would be expensive. It would take a lot of time, a lot of thinking. But what if the doing more actually doesn't cost you anymore? Because in the past, doing more cost you margin. Now doing more, it's almost like, how can you gamify it? How can you have more fun and help clients go further? And that kind of thinking and like that turns a client from like a 12-month engagement, or for some, like a 6-month LTV in churn rate, to a multi-year partnership. And I think that that kind of value play is only achieved if you believe in the services stack. You're selling on judgment, transformation, and belief. And you're deploying agents to handle most of the execution work. Obviously, as the technology gets better, they will get better with higher quality for you to continue to offset and do even more execution. And that's a real reality we're getting into. If you're not on the cutting edge on this, and if you're not testing this out or tinkering, you should, so that you can understand the aha moment of what's happening here, so we can be on the same boat. If you don't do this now, if you don't do this and you're doing the margin play, in this quadrant, you will feel guilt. And you feel like you should pass the savings on to your client because now your work is easier. And sure, you can do that. Like, remember the example I had earlier that an agency literally gave an AI discount? You could do that, but remember, clients aren't hiring you for difficulty. They're not saying, hey, I want you to go through the gauntlet for me so that I don't have to. They're hiring you for results. They don't care how easy or how hard it is for you. They're hiring you for end state. So I'll take it a step further. If you drop your prices because AI made delivery easier for you, then you're training the market to devalue your expertise. You're training every future client that your worth is tied to how hard you work and not how much value you create. And that's a positioning problem that only can get worse over time. It compounds in the negative over time. Even if you're still getting your bearings in the agentic era, I would say start in this quadrant. Start here while you can, build the infrastructure for the other quadrants if you want to go to the other quadrants. Again, you don't have to, but if you can, start here. Because if you want to move to another quadrant, you must believe and know that you have to move up the value chain in order to price accordingly, in order to create net new value. You can't do that if you don't start in this quadrant. Which brings us to quadrant 2, which is the volume play. So this is where things get interesting and it starts to feel like software as a service or platforms as a service. So I think this quadrant is going to surprise a lot of people because, well, this is nothing we've traditionally done in the services and consulting agency space. So if you remember Jevons, I hope I'm pronouncing right, Jevons paradox, the cost of delivering a unit drops and the demand increases at the same time. So this quadrant is built directly from that insight. So in the model that you have here, where a client pays for your services as an end product and state outcome. So it's almost like how in software, you're able to do usage-based pricing. Quadrant 2 here is similar, akin to that, but instead of usage, consumption means actual outcomes. There, you're not pricing for set hours. They're not paying retainers or like subscription fees for a set number of things that you'll deliver for them or outputs per month. The base is on actual usage and the outcomes of your service. So usage, again, isn't, oh, we ran 50 ads this month. You're getting charged per ad. Usage and consumption based on outcomes is, hey, we ran 50 ads for you. We got these many qualified sales calls and they pay for that. And ideally, you move up the value chain so that you can verify and qualify those sales calls. Because if you have AI helping you on the delivery, you can have most of your focus and even AI agents qualify and verify on the CRM. We could also look at campaigns deployed, for example, as another example as end outcome. Maybe research decks delivered. How many things can you actually are done, polished, finished outcomes that you can deliver to a client? Brand audits can be another one, or Excel sheets ready for end of month close. You get the picture. The goal here isn't just focusing on leading indicators, but going as far down the value chain that you can. So this is just selling on outputs or outcomes for that. But unlike traditional software like the usage model, where literally you can have an infinity bill, like I'm not sure if you're like me, you toyed around some softwares and they have a usage-based bill and you've accidentally spent $1,000 in 20 minutes. I know that's happened to me. But that's not a good client experience. So I would recommend if you're doing this model for your clients, setting a cap or a tier where above that tier, they either get a discount rate per outcome or they effectively get free whatever till the end of the month. And the thinking here is like, well, if I do that, am I not leaving money on the table? I honestly think we should revisit churn. So churn is a real issue. I've seen from 3-month churns to 3-year churns. In some rare occasions, marketing agencies sticking clients around for 7+ years. That's actually rare, but churn is an issue. That's because most people can't deliver results. And we have to address the elephant in the room. To play in quadrant 2, you need to be confident in your results and be able to deliver results to clients, like period, full stop. With your ability to deliver these results, now backed with AI agents for execution, when you price at this quadrant, you want to have your consumable service used for the entire lifetime that your client is in business. So your lifetime value effectively becomes, how long is my client in business? What are the things that I can provide as done ready states for them that they will always need? How do I systemize that in a way where they don't have to log into something, they don't have to click through software and get super complicated and pay exuberant licensing fees or pay unlimited amounts? And I work with them, they pay for that, and honestly, they'll need this for the lifetime of their business. So it is forcing net new value, and it's also forcing a type of relationship that I don't think we've quite seen as much in the consulting and agency space. We have seen the pay per performance, but those churn so fast. I mean, you get spam with them all the time. I get spam with them all the time. Hey, can you handle 50 new sales calls this month? It's like, okay, everyone is using that offer because they're probably doing $1,000 deposit. I think we know the secret behind it. It's like a deposit up front, and then they only refund it if you get performance. Like they only make money on the deposit. They don't make money on the back because they can't fulfill the promises. So you want to look at what is the net new value that you can create? How can you enable AI agents to help you get further down the value chain so that you can get to done end outcome? And that is in alignment with what the business, your clients, are going to need for the rest of the time that they're in business. So it's shifting from a traditional services model, like, oh, my client only needs me for 3 months, 6 months. Our average client lifetime value is 18 months, maybe 3 years. It's shifting that for legitimately, as long as they're in business, they're going to be a client. If that's too big of thinking, like this is the type of net new value that I want you to start thinking about with AI agents, not just like running business as we used to. So that's very important. And again, capping it or not feeing unlimitedly, you might be feeling like you're leaving money on the table. To be honest with you, that doesn't matter. Your whole goal is lifetime value, not short-term profit. I want you to start thinking in years, even 3-year increments. Maybe decades is a little bit too exaggerated to think about here. But I would like you to start thinking about in year to date, not month to month, year to date minimum. And that's the volume play. That's quadrant 2. More consumption, better experience, longer relationships. It feels like I'm doing a pizza commercial here. But more consumption, better experience, longer relationships, extraordinarily longer lifetime value. And again, that's the level of value creation that this quadrant you're able to create and unlock. I honestly think that this is possible now if you're, again, selling above the judgment layer in the services stack and are leveraging agentic workflows for execution. Which brings us to quadrant 3, which is the intellectual property play, the IP play. This is where I'm most actively building right now in my own practice. And I think this is the quadrant where more service providers don't even realize that's available to them. So every agency and consultancy has their own way of doing things. You've spent years perfecting the craft, maybe even decades, developing your own methodology, your frameworks, your playbooks, the way they take a client point A to point B. That's your IP. In the past, the only way to monetize your IP was to sell your time applying it 1 hour in to 1 hour out. Your capacity was the bottleneck. And then we invented info products. So they started training people on cohorts, started doing digital and started selling info products so that you can scale yourself, but you're essentially selling that IP on a timed unit. You're just licensing it out through different mediums. And you could only serve so many clients because the goal of info products is to get people to get to the back end where you're selling the high touch services. And you can only serve so many people, go only as not too deep with your clients, because every engagement required you or someone on your team to personally execute the process. Those are still valid. So I'm not saying those are done away with, but I like to introduce a third path to package your IP into agentic workflows. Your methodology becomes your operating system, and the agents used to execute it, now 1 hour of your strategic input, 1 hour of planning, processing, and just creating the plan and having the agents run it could equal, and this is no joke, like hundreds of hours of human labor. And this is not an exaggeration. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm giving you real, like when you have the aha moment, you'll realize what's possible here. So I want to be really clear about what this actually means, because I don't want you to gloss over this. You're not going to give your client license to your IP and then have them run with it. You're not going to productize it into a software and hoping they figure it out. You're literally going to be running your internal agents to deliver your service, your way, your methodology, the way that you do things at scale that was physically impossible before, enabling a client to get value faster, higher quality, and to go further to finished, I'm calling it finished goal, complete as possible, because the value you can create goes from 10x to 100x. And if you work with enterprise clients or you work with larger clients and you know how slow they can move, I don't think 1000x is unfathomable. You can truly be in 1000x force multiplier because you're condensing time to get to value quicker. And when you do that, you're able to go even further. So I'll give you a real example of what this looks like. So I'm currently in discussions with a potential client. They want to grow a division of their company to significant amounts, like millions of dollars. But they're not going to go and build the agents. They're not going to create workflows. They don't even care to do it. Like, it's not that they don't care, but they're not going to do it right now. They're in what I'm calling the partner trifecta, which I can elaborate later. What they want is the approach, the strategy, the capability, the execution to enable them to reach that level of growth using my unique methodology, using a way to get there. And because I've packaged this into several agentic workflows, to be honest with you, what used to take months, yes, months, can be delivered in weeks. And here's the pricing thing that I want to bring up here, is that you're not pricing your hours or your deliverables in this quadrant. You're not even pricing on how many people on your team are in the account. You're pricing the compressed time to value, the net outcome that your intellectual property creates for their business and their outcomes. So yes, this is value-based pricing, but you're deploying your intellectual property at scale, not just licensing it. So if you have strong intellectual property and you have a proven track record, like you've actually done the work to help clients get to where they want to be, you've done it by hand, you've done it with teams, then this quadrant is something you should push towards. You just have to ensure that you encode everything that you know, how you focus, how you execute to the agents, do quality assurance, add a quality assurance layer to it, and then make sure that you do sign off on it. You want to include human in the loop just to make sure, especially for high stakes clients. I always recommend that. You're not letting this thing run the wheel, at least not yet, but you definitely want to make sure that you're guiding it. Again, what I talked about on the services stack, if you want to read that, so that you focus that your ceiling isn't tied directly to how many people you can serve. The ceiling is tied directly to the value that you can create, not how much time you spend or the team size that you have or the hours you spend on a client side. You're charging based on value, which naturally leads us to quadrant 4, which is the value capture play. Now, I have to confess, performance and outcome-based pricing has always existed in consultancy and agency services. Revenue shares, value capture, skin in the game, none of this is new. What is new is your ability to actually influence outcomes. The problem with performance deals, and I've done them, I still have them, is that the old model always lacked control. You had the illusion of control. You'd take on a revenue share agreement, you'd do everything right on your side, but the client couldn't close, they'd fumble the leads, the founder would change their mindset or their strategy mid-quarter or mid-month, or the board wouldn't approve the product pivot or just any changes. So you'd eat the downside on the factors you don't even control. And those are still real variables now, but I want you to start thinking in net new value. Because again, in the past, if you're a smart operator, you would probably avoid all performance pricing unless you controlled every variable, and rarely you had control of every variable. But again, if you're selling on the services stack and you're creating agents to support and handle execution, and if you're following my not so subtle cues to leverage your agents to find net new value and go up the value chain so you can get clients closer to goal accomplished, then performance models actually are one of the most natural pricing models in the agentic era. Again, if you're selling at the top of the services stack, transformation and belief. So when your agents are generating pipeline, you're designed a series of agents or series of workflows to generate pipeline or produce content at scale or running research flows or accelerating time to market. You now have more time, like we talked about, but you can also focus on the back end. If your agents are taking care of the leading indicators, how do you focus on the lagging indicators to drive performance? So you're not just advising, you're actually able to produce. You're able to look at your strategic expertise, make the right judgment calls. And then from there, you can actually implement the changes that need to happen so that we can reach the goal and produce the outcome. So like I mentioned, performance structures aren't new. You just now have more power, more time, maybe more breathing room if you set your services up right. So here's an example of a performance structure that I recently helped a client draft. Again, these are not new. These are not like revolutionary, but just to give you ideas of what's possible is a base operational fee. That's your floor. This could cover operational cost, strategy layer, ongoing delivery. This is like the minimum to maintain the relationship. You want to call a retainer, that's great, but a retainer usually constitutes the scope, and we're in the post-scope era where, yeah, you have stuff in the scope, but you're probably going to do more in the scope because you want to add more value. And then from there, your baseline, you have performance paid out tied to metrics that you directly influence. Again, these could be leading indicators that can be paid monthly and or lag and or. So not just one or the other, it can be one and the other. And lagging indicators that are paid either quarterly, and again, a cap, especially if you're doing like a percent of revenue generated, you'd want to do a cap. Same principle as quadrant 2. The client shouldn't, the number that you charge the client should never be a number that they resent paying you. You want the experience to be well, because again, if you're going to help create massive value, you want that client for as long as you can, not just make the most profit in the short amount of time and then always have the repeat clients or have new clients churn because they just don't like the relationship with you. Again, the services stack stands selling on transformation, relationship, and then belief. Those are the top 2 things that you can be selling at. And the cap, in my opinion, is a trust mechanism. This is an opinion. So you can not listen to me on that, but that's just my opinion. What I'm not including in this quadrant is equity splits. Like you can, and again, this is another opinion. I've done equity splits in the past, and those are great. They're really cool in the moment because you're like, hey, this is nice, but they don't always pay off. Maybe one day they will, but the reason I'm sharing this is that equity ties your compensation to factors you don't always control. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into equity. And performance, at least now with the agentic era, if you focus on net new value, go up the value chain, focus on leading indicators and have your agents focus on that, and you as a human, judgment, strategic advisory, and actually implementing those strategic advisories in the transformation and belief layer, you can focus on the back-end conversion. And ideally, you can focus on more control so that you can get to end state done. And you're tying your outcomes to things that you can directly influence. You can get paid on a timeline that matches the value you're creating. So those are the quadrants, the 4 modes of the 4 quadrants where you can be pricing your agency and consulting services. Now, I do want to give a few notes that I think we're in a unique window of time because markets do take time to adapt, and I think that's a good thing. So you might, after going all this, you might feel a little anxious to implement something like this or feeling that you're running behind the 8 ball. Because yes, changes in the marketplace and changes with agentic workflows are changing at exponential speed. Honestly, they are. And to be frank with you, it's a lot to take in all at once. But what I'm writing in this section is hopefully to give you a breath, a little breathing space, not to stall you or to have you lollygag or contemplate taking action, but ideally for you to breathe for a minute and then strategically act. And here's the point I want to make. Not every market is going to adopt AI at the same speed. If you read Crossing the Chasm, you know this pattern. Technology adoption doesn't happen uniformly. It doesn't happen all at once. There's innovators, there's early adopters, there's the gap between the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggards, okay? We're in the gap right now, the most significant gap in consultant and agency services, because tech-forward agencies, like I have them on my WhatsApp, tech-forward agencies are already building with agents. When the release came out, they were already testing day one. They were restructuring pricing, moving fast, breaking things, figuring things out, okay? But the clients, most of the industries might be a few years from fully integrating AI into their own operations. I don't know the timelines on that, so don't quote me on this, but all I know is that there is a gap right now. Could that timeline condense to months from years? Probably. Don't bet on things taking shorter than we're actually predicting. And if you have that mindset, you have a builder mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, a net new value creation mindset, changing and challenging the things that we do right now and why we've always done them. Honestly, I think this is where you have a huge competitive advantage, and this is where you can come in, because in this gap right now, you deliver outcomes that your clients couldn't produce in their own timelines. And if you're using the value that we just discussed from quadrant 1, 3, 2, 3, or 4, if you're using the value quadrants, you're able to price appropriately, make good profits, take care of a team, take care of your family, take care of the community, make an impact, thrive, help your clients go further. You don't have to slash your prices just because AI made things cheaper. You just have to challenge yourself. How can I go up the value chain? The clients who need you the most right now aren't even thinking about AI pricing. What they're thinking about is their problem. They're thinking about the 8-month project that you can deliver in 6 weeks. Not exaggerating. They're thinking about their issues. And if you can help condense and collapse time and deliver more value and you actually care, then your services will be in demand. The way you deliver and price will shift. You will have to adapt, but your net value is still needed. And again, to quote Jevons' paradox, your services may be even more in demand, but this window isn't going to be open forever. Markets do catch up. Everyone now is on the cloud. Everyone is using Wi-Fi or cell phones now and tablets. I mean, those are just some examples. But right now there's a gap between what's possible with AI agents and what most businesses are actually doing. This is an enormous gap. There's also a talent gap. If you're not testing, if you're not doing this, you're not training your team, there will be those who can and are able to and those who cannot. And that gap is actually stretching every single day. It's more exponential than you think. So who do you work with? So I know you have your ideal client profile, you have your ICP, you have your demographics, psychographics, firmographics, great. I want to share with you a few of the conversations I've been having with agency owners. I know those who've been in the game for much longer than I have, like 15, 20 years. And just like what's shifted in the market and what makes like a good partner. It's also what I'm seeing with clients. So not every client fits the new value quadrant, especially quadrant 3 and 4, where you have real skin in the game and you're making a bet. You're making a bet on performance. You're making a bet on the client. You're making a bet on the industry. And you have to vet all the conditions before you put your chips on the table. But like I discussed, who do you actually work with? From working with my own clients to chatting with friends and colleagues with veteran consultants and agency owners, I found 3 simple characteristics that come up time and time again about who are really good fits in this new era we're entering. This is your ideal client, but these are just 3 different conditions or 3 different characteristics to think about. And I do recommend all 3 be present when you're selling and you're pricing, you're scoping out. Again, scoping out in the sense of you're figuring out where you can add the most value. So the first condition is the client is in a growing market and data meets conviction. So this is pretty obvious, but it's pretty simple. The client and the industry that you're working in needs to be in a market that 1, you believe in, 2, is growing, and 3, you can actually sell on belief and transformation layers. Because again, you're not selling your services anymore. I'll say that again, you're not selling your services anymore. So I'll give you a real example. I was recently connected on a call with a company in the direct-to-consumer health diagnostic space. I never worked in that space. And I was just so excited to meet them. And I was like, dude, this is so cool because I already believe in the market. They didn't need to convince me about where the market was going. I was a big believer from the beginning. I had such high conviction and growth potential that energy, that excitement was apparently contagious. It was like, hey, you can actually help us. Like, how? Like, I focus with consultants. I focus on these things. No, there is actually service providers. Like, you could actually help us. Like, wow, that's phenomenal. Again, selling at the top of the stack, not on, oh, here's my services. Here's what I can do. Are you a square peg? I'm trying to fill a square peg. Like, are you a square peg? Like, or round hole, whatever. So you do need to marry data to where the market is going. Where is the market going to be in demand for years, not just now? And a simple filter you can use, and again, this is very simplistic, but if you threw a rock in the industry, would you hit a winner? Would you hit a growing company? If the answer is yes, then all tides rise together, then yes, you'll be in good hands, but you also have to believe in it. If you answer like, oh, I don't know, I have to actually analyze the company and think about it, you're overthinking it. The market has to be winning. You also have to believe. Also, if you don't have conviction about a specific space or a specific market, don't take on the client. Like, it's not going to be a good fit. If you don't believe in it, just don't take on the client, because to run the new value quadrant on the client, you have to believe. You have to believe in where the company is going, where the industry is going, because you're going to be forced to get creative, to find new ways to create net new value. And if you don't do that, you're just going to lead to instant burnout, like instant burnout. All right, so condition number 2 for the partner trifecta is the industry has to be a tech laggard. Now, this is counterintuitive, but it is critical. If the client industry is already like tech deep and they're building their own agentic workflows, unless they're growing super fast and need more hands on deck, then they may not need you for long. If they're internalizing the capacity, hiring their own AI team, you will get commoditized. But and we're actually seeing that with the layoffs, by the way. If you ever seen like how many people are laid off because engineering jobs, it's because that's being commoditized. Just keep that in mind. But if the industry is slower to adopt, then they need you, because remember, they're not buying your agents, they're not buying your IP workflows, they're not buying that. They're buying the end outcome. They're buying the performance. They're not buying your services. They don't care about your services. They care about end state and the results that you can provide by framing and positioning your outcomes in one of the new value quadrants. You'll be able to craft a delightful client experience that they'll enjoy and they want to keep working with you. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that Tech-Laggard doesn't mean that they're ancient Stone Age or they're never going to get technology. It's just that they're not there yet. They're either growing because of a condition 1, they're either growing so fast that they're still focusing on product delivery and client satisfaction, or they're growing so fast they're focusing on new strategy, or they're just overwhelmed with growth. They need more people in there. And if you can help them get efficiency gains, that's going to compound even further than if they weren't experiencing growth. So again, it's not because they don't care. It's just because they're too busy focusing on other things. This is where you come in. And then the final condition is that the founder or the person that hires you gets it. They get your value. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to sell them. You don't have to argue with them. Non-negotiable. I don't think you can change someone's belief on a sales call. Even if you do like a 5-hour sales call, you're not going to change their belief. If they don't believe your work is important, you're done. There's nothing that you can do to convince them that your work is important. Because when someone's anchored in a belief, this is their worldview. This is how they view themselves. This is how they view others. This is how they make judgment calls and how they maneuver and move through the world. You're not going to change that overnight. So if the founder or stakeholder you're working with doesn't get it, doesn't get the value that you're delivering, just end the conversation there. Peace out. There's more people that will get it, okay? Or you're in the wrong industry, but that's really rare. It's mostly like a leadership mindset thing. And again, this is because you want to be selling on the transformation and belief layer in the services stack. And in short, to be honest with you, like, if you do end up hiring that client or they end up hiring and working with you, then you'll spend half your time justifying why you exist instead of creating value. And that's not a good experience for you. You'll be treated like a commodity. The performance conversation will always be adversarial. So you want to actually be able to focus on net new value because you're still arguing on base fees or retainers or even hours. And then you have to explain yourself why something isn't going right when something isn't going as planned. And it's just a really bad state to be in versus, focusing on the vision of what you believe their business can be. They understand the value and you want to work together and you have a track record. Again, you have to be able to deliver these results and you have to have a track record to do this. So in other words, they need to value the outcome that you provide, not the activity. If that understanding isn't there from the beginning, just frankly, move on. And when you find a client who sits at the intersection of all three, growing market, might be a little tech laggard in terms of the industry itself, and the founder or the person who hires you gets it, that's where you're able to go deep. That's where you're able to do your best work and add the most value, make the most profit, and have the most fun. Because this window won't last forever. I have no clue how long this window is going to last, but it's not going to last forever. And eventually, industries do catch up. But we are in a very unique and important moment where this convergence exists, and the service providers who recognize it, if you recognize it and you build partnerships, you could outlast this window. So I encourage you to be one of them. So if you read or if you listen to the Services Stack podcast or Substack, I talk about the craft model, where I think that this is going to replace the agency model, where a founder or principal holding belief in transformation layers with clients have a small team of elite T-shaped operators, and then they manage and orchestrate agents for production underneath. I think that's the model that we're heading into, where everyone's hands on deck. Obviously, it's not going to be all the time, but you have a small portfolio of clients and you're able to deliver significant value, but in net new ways that you couldn't before. And I'm advising working with founders with this, by the way. So this is not just imaginary make-believe. Like I've been preaching this since 2018 or 19, when I designed a profit model that this naturally aligns to. But anyways, the craft model is the engine that makes this new value quadrant work. Because when you're running the craft model with agents underneath you, you can go deeper. You can do things with clients and help them grow in ways that you couldn't before. And that's what the whole piece of this net new value creation is about. What couldn't you do before that you can now do? Because in the past, you were limited by capacity. You had the skills, you had to solve with deeper problems, you had the knowledge, you had the judgment, but you didn't have the right team, the right bandwidth, or enough hours, or the client blew their hours a month for solving a specific issue. So they had to wait for their 50 hours to unlock for the next month. You had to wait 2 weeks for that. In short, you weren't able to focus on net new value, the new stuff that you can do for clients. And you'd top out at strategy. You might be pushing high-level consulting, but to execute on that strategy, to measure, to optimize the day-to-day, to actually produce the outcomes, you wouldn't be able to do that. You required a new team that you couldn't, you need, or a team that you couldn't afford, or the team that you were afraid that if you hired them, you had to lay them off because if you didn't close new business next month, you'd have an overhead. But now with the Agentic workforce and augmented work, you have the ability to do more production. You have the ability to have your team focus on judgment and strategy. You have the ability to fulfill the requirements or to fulfill the recommendations that you're making to your clients. You're literally unlocking superpowers. And I know that sounds really hype, but once you understand what's possible, this is very, very exciting. And it's not because you lacked the creativity. You should just lack the capacity to do it in the past. Hopefully now you can see how you can do that, how you can think about the client relationship. And again, same service provider that used to top out at strategy can now do delivery and strategy and execution and measurement and optimization, all the way down to where the value is actually created in the client's business. You can sit in the trenches with them. You can be a true partner in their growth, not just an advisor who sends pretty little slide decks and waits for the next quarter to review and maybe check in on recommendations once a quarter or once every 6 months. Okay. And that's where performance-based pricing finally makes sense, because you're not just advising from the sidelines, you're getting in there with them, you're helping produce outcomes, you're helping run the engine. So if you choose, you don't have to do any of this, but you can choose to do that. And this is the possibility of what's happening with net new value creation. The agencies that run the craft model in the new value quadrant are going to be unrecognizable compared to agencies today. There'll be smaller, leaner teams, bigger impact, better client relationships, and better margins. And that's honestly the future that I'm building. And I know there's a lot of fear mongering, there's a lot of change happening. That's the future that I'm optimistic towards. That's the future that I'm building. That's the future I'm helping clients build. And if that resonates with you, I urge you to stop discounting your innovation. The teams that drop fees because AI does the work is pricing the input. You're not pricing the output. And that's a race to the bottom. And the bottom is virtually zero. I've said this before, because eventually the client will realize they can just run the agents themselves, or they just say, why pay you this much if I can just pay a tool? So don't do that. If AI is deflationary on inputs, on value creation, it's the opposite. And it's up to you to identify that net new value, capture it, help people go further, and price accordingly. So the question is, which quadrant of the new value quadrant are you going to be operating in? And whether you have the conviction to price the value that you're creating instead of discounting the tool that helps you create it. And that sounds a little poetic. I'm going to repeat it. The question is, which value quadrant are you going to be operating in? And do you have the belief in the services that you deliver, in the clients that you help, in the industry that they're in, and their products and services? Do you have the belief that you can help them go further to create net new value and price it accordingly and have the conviction that, yes, this is the value I create, and yes, I'm going to stand by the pricing? Or are you just going to give a discount because the tool that you're using helps you create it and you're like, oh, I should discount it? So you actually don't believe in the product or in your industry or in your service or in your delivery. So build the agents under you. Choose your quadrant deliberately. You don't have to choose all of them, just choose one. Find your ideal clients using the trifecta that I mentioned earlier, and let your beliefs drive the bets, drive the investments, the bets that you'll make in your clients, in your services, in your new R&D, and have fun. I think we forgot about having fun. Literally, and this is what I believe in opinion, this is the most exciting times to be alive, to create, to find, and create new solutions to help clients go further. Literally, be creative, have fun, find new ways to go deeper. Just tell your client, hey, I need to figure out how we can create net new value. Let's have a chat about that. That's an easy way to get started. Now, if you want to discuss more intimately, one-on-one, how this affects your business, how you can create net new value, and how to think about your own pricing, reach out to me. This is a subject that's very, very close to me that I'm helping not only with my clients, but also looking in my own organizational structure. So reach out to me. If you found this podcast useful, you wouldn't believe that the average person, this is a stat, the average person impacts over 10,000 people in their lifetime. I bet you really didn't know that. If you found this at all useful, share it with one person. Share it with one person at least. It's because you don't know how you're sharing this article or this podcast to that one person can make a substantial impact in their life. And if someone did share this article or this podcast with you, welcome. I'm so excited for you to be here. Hit subscribe so you can get updates like these where I share intellectually honest growth tips and frameworks for business and life. Everything here that I create is designed, written, and crafted in San Diego, California. There's going to be grammatical issues. There might be typos. I might have word issues here, there. But again, this is human. This is me. And I am here in San Diego, my front office. And if this is your first time listening to me or hearing who I am, my name is Raul. I help service founders redesign how they price, sell, and operate in the agentic AI era. You can learn more about the work I do, who I work with, at dogoodwork.io. That's dogoodwork.io. And if you're ready to build the next version of your firm, let's chat. You can hit me up here. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, and we'll go from there. Until next time, this is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.